Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So, yeah, we are all very excited about the current advancements in quantum and the potential impacts it can have in solving real-world applications. And we are all eagerly waiting for that reality. But uh, let's have a look how to make that reality a bit more sustainable. Yeah. So, before we go into more details, let me introduce myself. My name is Mubeen. I have a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and I'm currently doing my master's in sustainable resource management at TUM. And I'm here part of the sustainability team at PushQuantum. And as Tomak mentioned, I'm a working student in sustainability at QEI. And it's actually the experience and the work that we did at QEI that kind of enabled me to formalize this in the form of a presentation and develop this kind of a guide for startups that they can follow to initiate their sustainability function. And so I'd like to formally acknowledge QEI for the role they played in this regard. Yeah, so let's dive in. First, we'll take a look at why sustainability matters for companies, and especially why does it matter for companies in the quantum industry. And later, we will take a closer look at the Startup Sustainability Guide, which is a guide document that we here at PushQuantum are developing for startups to help initiate their sustainability function. So, why sustainability at all? In the light of the current climate crisis, individuals and organizations have their role to play in minimizing their environmental footprint and also taking climate conscious decisions. And the motivation to do so could be different for different individuals and different organizations. For people, for someone like us, it could be to reduce our resource consumption levels. But for organizations, multiple reasons could motivate them to take sustainability into account. It could be the responsibility as a company to proactively participate in the fight against climate change, could be to align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals to become a responsible manufacturer, or to attract investors, new customers, partners, and new talent, and position themselves in the market as a company that stands for something. Also, to comply with reporting regulations and also get recognition for early voluntary action in sustainability matters. But why do we need to talk about sustainability in quantum? So part of the reason for the current climate crisis can be attributed to the lack of awareness in the past and lack of proactive effort in topics related to sustainability. So,
Thank you.
Barrier-free economic gain and technological advancement was the primary concern in the past. There were many regulations that push companies to take responsibility for their actions, but the situation is different now. There are regulations and there are tools like life cycle assessment and corporate carbon footprint assessment that enable companies to comply with these regulations. But for emerging technologies, it's like Tomek said, it's always a debate between speed and impact. And especially with technologies like quantum that can have substantial environmental benefits, what is more important? Is it getting to a stage of maturity as fast as possible, or taking proactive measures along the developmental stages that can kind of mitigate the potential negative impacts at maturity? I would say it's both. Getting to a stage of maturity as fast as possible so that the full quantum potential can be realized is important, as well as taking proactive measures along the developmental stages is equally important, because the environmental crisis is happening right now and not in the quantum future. So we should find a way to kind of weigh the emissions that we are emitting now with more weightage than the promised emissions of quantum applications in the future. And startups and enabling tech have their role to play in kind of embracing this concept and empowering this throughout the quantum value chain. So with quantum, what we have now is an opportunity that we missed in the first and second IT revolutions, an opportunity to develop this technology sustainably. why not take it? At PushQuantum, we did decide to take it. And so we understood the role that startups play in shaping a quantum ecosystem. And we understand that startups of today will become the backbone of a quantum industry of tomorrow. And therefore, to grow an industry sustainably, pushing the concept of sustainability through startups, we felt that that's the right thing to do. And therefore, we developed a guide that helps startups to do exactly this. So it kind of answers the following questions. How can startups with their limited resources allocate time and money for sustainability efforts? How can startups navigate the dilemma of prioritizing between conflicting topics? And what is the silver bullet when it comes to tackling sustainability challenges? Well, let me burst that bubble for you right away. We don't have a silver bullet solution to tackle sustainability, but we do have some regular bullets in the form of some bullet points in the coming slides. Let's take a look. So it starts with setting short-term and long-term goals. So it all begins with understanding why sustainability matters for your organization. The reasons could be different for different organizations. It could be different from the reasons that I mentioned earlier in the previous slides. And so understanding them is of utmost importance. Then a short-term goal can be anything like calculating your first corporate carbon footprint, which was kind of our goal at QEI. And a long-term goal can be something like driving your organization towards net zero, and make sure that these goals are attainable and aligned with company values. And the second step would be to understand what is a key product of the company and do a life cycle analysis of the product. A life cycle assessment is a complete study of the product from raw material extraction to disposal throughout all the life cycle stages, and identifying a key product helps to remove the redundancy in doing the assessment for each of those products. And a key product can be something that shares most of the traits with the products in your portfolio. And you can do this assessment if it's a rough carbon footprint assessment, you can just do this in MS Excel. Or even if you want to do a more comprehensive, in-depth analysis of all the damage categories, you can go for softwares like OpenLC and SimaPro, or even you could hire external consultants that do the work for you. Then, as Tomak said, then it's easier if you have a sustainability team, a focused team in your organization that takes care of these activities that can, it can be done by hiring a working student or intern. Luckily, Tomak thought about me. So yeah, it's done to make sure that sustainability doesn't become a secondary task, and it helps to alleviate the time constraints of the management team, and also ensuring that the sustainability team works closely with the management team helps in influencing decision making. Then comes the part which is I'd say the fun part, also a bit hard part. And that's evaluating your corporate carbon footprint. And so it's basically the total amount of greenhouse gases emitted directly and indirectly by the organization. And this figure gives you an overview of all the emissions. And here we have scope 1 emissions. It's a direct emissions owned by facilities owned by the company. And scope 2 emissions are those emissions that are coming from purchased heat and electricity. And scope 3 being all the upstream and downstream activities. And usually these scope 3 account for more than 90% of a company's emission on an average. And so taking them into account, only if you take them into account, you'll get a comprehensive overview of your emissions. And it's usually the place where you can take some actions on is in scope 3. So yeah, after you do the CCF, you could do an ESG performance assessment. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, and you can measure your impact apart from carbon emissions. And it can be done by an ESRS double materiality assessment, which is just identifying the topics in the European Sustainability Reporting Standard, which are material to your organization from an impact or a financial perspective or both. So having this done in the initial stages of the study will help you as you move on with the sustainability function. So this is the overview of the CCF and ESG project that we did at QEI. It's all started with the learning phase. It's about reading the GSG protocol and the ESG guidelines and whatever. And also, it's about creating a rough overview of your current emission status and identifying hotspots in it. Then came the data collection part. It's included doing surveys and talking with different departments and collecting emission factors and cleaning the data that the departments gave you. It's yeah, I think I would say it's the most like time consuming part of it. Then the carbon accounting. For me, it was a fun part creating an Excel tool, making sure that it's fairly automated and robust. And so we did our carbon footprint assessment for 2022 and 2023, and the second time it took less than half the time that we did the first time. So having a good tool at your disposal is always good. And then with the data that we collected, we can do a lot of analysis, including criticality assessment, where we compare the significance of each emission category against the accuracy level of your assessment, and the materiality assessment, again comparing your control on each category versus the significance. And you could also do a cost benefit analysis where you identify those low-hanging fruits especially, and you identify if you spend how much amount of money to reduce one category, then what would be the benefit, what would be the emission reduction you can achieve in the total CCF. And in parallel, we also did an ESG assessment, and we obtained an ESG assessment report. And based on these four analysis, we ended up with some action points, which included immediate actions that we can take and some long-term projects that we can do. So by now, after all these assessments, you would obtain the bigger picture of sustainability. And you can only obtain this if you remove yourself from the organization and look at the organization as a single entity. And it will also help you identify some low-hanging fruits and which are the first actions that you can take to kind of avoid your whole environmental impact. So after all this, obtaining the bigger picture, what can you do with it? The second part of the guide helps you through it. So before that, it's always good to stay up to date with the regulations. So CSRD has been in effect since Jan 2024, and larger companies meeting two out of these three criteria, and SMEs. For SMEs, especially it's 50 plus employees, 8 million plus net turnover, and 4 million plus assets. And if the SME is listed in the European market and meets two out of these three criteria, then they have to report on CSRD. So having these things in mind will help you align yourself with, okay, when you have to start reporting and when is the right time to start working on these topics. And by the time that you have to start reporting, you don't have to go back and then get all the documents and then, you'll be in a mess. So it's always beneficial if you think early. And yeah, the reporting is done to the SRO standards, so always having that in mind and always being aware of what the standards are and what you have to report on is always important. And then comes developing a sustainability strategy. It was kind of the roadmap that Thomas shared earlier. It had some immediate action items, long-term projects, and keeping in mind the long-term goal. And while you develop this strategy, you have to keep in mind the emissions reduction hierarchy, where you have offsetting carbon emissions at the very bottom. So carbon offsetting shouldn't give companies the freedom to operate however they want, emit however they want, and then later kind of offset all those emissions. It shouldn't work like that. The first priority should be to avoid emissions wherever possible. Then the unavoidable emissions, we can try to reduce them, or we can try to replace parts of the process with less emission intensive process. And only the remaining chunk of the emission should be offset. So keeping this kind of mantra in mind will help you design a good sustainability strategy. Now, after all this, it's time to take some action. So, in order to do that, you have to get the respective departments on board. And trust me, you don't want to push too hard. Don't push change on the employees. Okay, don't randomly on a day tell them that okay, we are doing things differently now. So it understand that it takes time and be empathetic and be patient with them, and so make sure that it doesn't become an extra burden for the employees. It should become a natural process. It would obviously be slow, but it would be long lasting. So then yeah, keep track of the impact. There is a certain part of the roadmap that you'll be repeating annually. It's usually the CCF and ESG part of it, and study the benefits associated with the implemented action. So kind of weigh if he has some financial spending on reducing some part of your emissions, then kind of weigh whether that kind of how much that influence your actual emission reduction. And also analyze your trends in CCF against metrics like company revenue, so that you can always have in mind how the CCF is growing with relation to company growth. And also align yourself with the roadmap again and again. Make sure you see the big picture and kind of zoom out and yeah, make sure that it's all aligned with the roadmap. So last but not least, it's communicating openly, especially the internal communication between different departments, the management team and the sustainability team should be transparent and bidirectional. It should be used to spread awareness on the topic and educate employees on why we are focusing on this topic and why we are spending time and effort on this. And it will help foster a cohesive mindset towards sustainability and and a shared responsibility towards it. And it will also help employees to take pride in their work and understand that okay, they are working for a company which stands for a higher purpose. So it's not just the financial gain that we get out of it. Yeah, so what can startups in quantum do a bit more extra is they can look into the supply chain. They can look at the critical materials in the supply chain and analyze them from a scalability and sustainability perspective. And why I should do this is due to the geopolitical tension regarding critical materials at the moment. And especially when you think about China's dominance in control and of operation and processing of rare earth elements in 2022, I think 70% of global REs or rare earth elements were controlled by Chinese government. And so it's critical from a security perspective, and also the quantum delta in a study that Tom referred to earlier also highlights this. And it's also, but the problem with the studies is they haven't looked at it from a sustainability or scalability perspective. And that's exactly why companies should take voluntary action in looking into the supply chain from a scalability perspective to identify potential bottlenecks in scaling quantum future. So I would like to leave you with this question: how sustainable is our quantum future? And I would say it's just like they say with money. It's you have to spend money to make money. I would say it's the same thing. It's true for carbon. You have to emit carbon to save carbon. But how much can we afford to emit at the moment? That's the question we need to find the answer. Yeah, thank you. And you can scan this QR code to get access to the full guide and stay entangled with us for more updates on the guide. Thank you.